Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The Energy Department has just selected 27 entrepreneurs for its Lab-Embedded Entrepreneurship Program known as LEEP. Those fellows will spend 2 years inside national labs developing technologies that could reshape energy, manufacturing, and even agriculture. Since its launch in 2015, LEEP has helped over 180 startups raise more than $4 billion and create thousands of jobs. Here to explain how the program works and what's ahead for this year's cohort is Dr. Chris Saldana, who leads the initiative at DOE. Dr. Saldana, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Terry, for having me on the program.
Well, let's start with the basics. The Lab-Embedded Entrepreneurship Program, or LEEP. Tell us what that is and how long it's been around.
Yeah, the Lab-Embedded Entrepreneurship Program, or as we refer to it as LEEP, is a technology commercialization program based out of the national laboratories that accelerates and deploys technology innovations across America, but providing training and access to DOE research and development resources at the national laboratories to drive transformational challenges in U.S. industry. It's been around for about 10 years.
And what makes it different from other federal innovation initiatives?
This is a very unique program in that the actual program itself allows entrepreneurs from outside of the federal ecosystem to actually bring their innovations to the national labs. When we think of the range of capabilities that we have at our DOE national laboratories, it's quite amazing when you look at the facilities, advanced manufacturing capabilities, and just the people that are there. It's really a gem that we can provide to our burgeoning industry to enable technology commercialization. So it's unique in the sense that we bring innovators to the national labs to grow their businesses compared to other programs which potentially try to seek to spin out technologies from the national labs itself.
How does the selection process actually work? What kinds of people actually apply?
So the selection process is it's an open competition that we have innovators that are interested in developing new businesses and being a part of the LEAP program can apply to any of our 4 participating laboratories within the federal ecosystem, those being Chain Reaction Innovations at Argonne National Laboratory, Cyclotron Road at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, Innovation Crossroads at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, and Westgate at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So these innovators self-identify, they apply to our programs normally around the September timeframe for a given cohort. They'll apply to our program, we'll have interviews, and from there, we will be evaluating them generally based on the individual person that's leading those businesses and the proposed concept. And criteria for the person that is the business leader and technology leader might be things as leadership skills, technical expertise, their motivation and passion for their work and drive. And the project concept itself is looked at both from a technical potential and a business potential perspective. In terms of who is involved in the review of those processes, we have excellent folks at the national labs that are leading these technology incubation nodes that do the initial interviews, manage some of the in-person selection events, and the Department of Energy is the team that actually does the final selections for these innovators.
Are there certain technology areas or scientific exploration topics that you're specifically interested in?
So advanced manufacturing is a critical priority for the administration. Just in the last several months, we've launched a new national strategic plan for advanced manufacturing with the Office of Science and Technology Policy. And our secretary here at the Department of Energy is really focused on unleashing American energy innovation across the board in terms of new energy technologies, high-performance computing, quantum computing, AI, grid reliability and security, as well as critical minerals. Within the program itself, we are looking at advancing manufacturing and new materials across the board, and that can go into the myriad of energy generation technologies that are of interest, how we secure our grid through new grid components and technologies, as well as how do we build the domestic supply chain for critical minerals and materials. So we've had a range of folks that are involved in the program, it being focused on advanced manufacturing and materials, really can go across and address these problems in a number of different ways.
And how does the program actually work once someone is selected? What kind of support do they receive during their time at the lab?
Yeah, the program is very unique in that it provides multiple dimensions of support for new innovators. And that's really what attracts a range of businesses that might be interested in accessing capabilities of the national labs. I break it up into maybe two major portions. One is what is the support and training that we provide for the innovators. First, we provide financial support for innovators. I think for small businesses, support for salaries and cash flow is very important. So we find financial support for the innovators so that they can spend 2 years in the program developing their company, and that is in the form of a fellowship. We also provide training for the business and entrepreneurial aspects of starting a new company. How do we train our innovators to raise money from non-dilutive sources, from grants, or dilutive sources from venture capital investments? And we want to really look at supporting these innovators in those dimensions. We also find ways of plugging in our innovators with a strong network of investors. So that's to enable them to leverage the federal interest in their project to unlock private capital. In terms of access to the laboratories, we also provide them with a range of technical assistance, and that is in the form of access to world-class facilities. When you look at the national labs, we have a wide range of advanced manufacturing capabilities, large-scale pilot facilities, as well as characterization and scientific equipment. That's really important when you're looking at cutting-edge science. And then finally, it's just the great minds that we have at our national labs. We do have some of the best scientists across the world that are leading innovations in science for energy. And being able to work hand in hand or side by side with these experts is something that the innovators that become a part of the program are really interested in.
I'm speaking with Dr. Chris Saldana. He's the director of the Advanced Materials and Manufacturing Technologies Office at the Department of Energy. In July, you announced the new cohort, 27 innovators selected this year for the program. Tell us about who's in it and what you're most excited about.
Yeah, when the nice thing about having such a large program, such a broad interest in materials and manufacturing, there's really a range of exciting technologies that are coming out of this year's cohort. If we look at particular nodes in terms of who's involved, when we look at Cyclotron Road at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, they have a company that is developing new technologies for extracting critical minerals from industrial waste streams. And we all know how important critical minerals have been as of late. Developing a domestic supply chain for these minerals where the U.S. can operate independently of disruptions in global supply is incredibly important. So this particular innovator is going to be developing new technologies for extracting those critical minerals from our industrial waste streams. At Innovation Crossroads, we have which is at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, we have another innovator that is developing new technologies for increasing the energy efficiency of data centers. And we know that with the rising deployment of AI across the nation and the world, there's an increased interest in the development of energy efficient solutions for our compute capabilities, and in particular data centers, which have a major drain on the energy grid. In line with the interest that we have in the administration, we're really looking at how do we develop new technologies, and this particular innovator is developing a new cooling system, which, when you look at the energy draw for a data center, is one of the major aspects of the energy footprint for those facilities. Another one at Chain Reaction Innovations at Argonne National Laboratory is developing new manufacturing capabilities to deliver on quantum computing. So the rise of AI really is another important technology that will be important, and that is in quantum computing and next generation computing technology. And this particular innovator is developing a new hardware solution that enables encoding of information and computing through that particular technology. And then lastly, at Westgate, which is at our National Renewable Energy Laboratory, another important aspect is developing a secure grid that delivers on the energy demand that is needed. And one thing in particular that we are interested in is next generation energy storage technologies. And this particular innovator is developing a non-chemical approach. So when you look at energy storage, you can look at storing it in batteries is how most people think of it. This particular innovator is developing a new manufacturing solution to deliver energy storage through storing of kinetic energy in the form of flywheels, which is long been thought of as a way of storing energy that is more reliable and potentially better matched with the kinds of energy demands that we expect in the future. And these are just, I think, a great example of some of the technologies that are coming out of the lab.
Really spans the waterfront in terms of DOE's portfolio.
Yep, I agree. It's a really exciting time to be in materials and manufacturing, especially partnering with the national labs, which the program provides.
How do you evaluate the success for the participants' innovations?
Success is really important for us when we look at how we gauge the program. The program itself has been incredibly successful over time. Over the last 10 years, LEEP has launched more than 180 new businesses. 90% of them are still active and or have been acquired by larger companies, as we know in the private capital, venture capital space happen. And these startups in general have raised over $4.2 billion in follow-on funding from the private sector, which is just an incredible sign of the value that the program brings and that the innovators have had in impacting the energy mission. And it's also created 3,200 jobs over that time. So when we look at measuring success, we want to see the federal investment lead to the creation of new businesses, spur and spark the interest from the private sector in that follow-on funding, and also, impact the domestic workforce, the ability to create jobs here in our nation and bring manufacturing onto our shores.
I've been speaking with Dr. Chris Saldana. He's the director of the Advanced Materials and Manufacturing Technologies Office at the Department of Energy. Thanks so much for sharing this great program with us today.
Thanks, Terry. I appreciate it. And we're always on the lookout for, the next set of innovators. If you know someone, any of your listeners know someone that might be interested in participating in this program, we welcome them to learn more about it. The Lab-Embedded Entrepreneurship Program really is a gem here at the Department of Energy and within the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, where I call home.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Listen to the Federal Drive on your schedule. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
What makes a great leader in government? Christine Harada joins WEPA CEO Shane Canfield to reflect on her journey from aerospace engineering to the White House. In this episode, she shares lessons on public-private collaboration, leading with purpose, and why service, not power, should guide leadership.
Hello, and welcome to the Lessons in Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA. Today, I'm joined by Christine Harada, former Senior Advisor at the Office of Federal Procurement Policy within the Office of Management and Budget. Ms. Harada, welcome, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
You spent portions of your career working in both the public and the private sector. And from your experience, what makes leadership in the federal sector different than the private sector?
At the highest level, leadership in the public sector is very fundamentally at its core mission-driven. Right? The work is in the service of the public good, and the goals and the programs are frequently long-term, they're systemic, and they're incredibly complex. And success, isn't necessarily measured by quarterly earnings. We don't have that kind of drumbeat, but certainly more by the lasting impact that we have on Americans' lives. What's also unique about public sector is, in my view, the profound sense of history that you feel. And I think certainly I was very aware about the work that I was doing and how it builds on the efforts of those who came before me, and that future generations of leaders also depend on the decisions that were being made today. And that, for me, certainly provided a greater weight of responsibility.
That's a wonderful answer. And I was in the private sector for much of my career, and now WEPA is a nonprofit, and I really relate to what you said about being mission-driven rather than profit-driven. You've got a long-term view, and always at the core of it is serving others.
Yes.
Is there a moment that stands out to you from early in your career that influenced your leadership style later on?
I started out my career as an aerospace engineer, building satellites and airplanes. And when I first entered the workforce, my organization at the time had 120 people. We were a large company, 120 people, 4 women, and I was the only woman of color. I was also the youngest throughout the entire organization. And so, I remember having an experience when I was doing some engineering work. We had a design review, and I had seen some issues with the flight software that I pointed out. At the time, they're like, maybe it's not really that big of a concern. I was like, but in my heart, I knew that the issue was real and stayed with it. And sure enough, a few weeks later, that topic came up again, and we addressed it. Turns out my concern did indeed prove to be valid. And so it's just one of those experiences that really sank into me around ensuring that I am listening to everybody, period, end of story, within the organization, really thinking through about how do we take into consideration opinions from all different spectra as a third generation Japanese American, right, I was raised to be humble, keep your head down and work hard, etc. But at times, leadership also requires you to speak up, do so politely, with courage, etc. Even though you may be the only voice in your room, but certainly trust your voice. It also really helped shape my belief around diversity. DEI programs right now are viewed in a negative light. We're all mosaics, and they become better because you have those different experiences. And that's really stayed with me throughout the entirety of my career.
The diversity issue is a really big one coming from the insurance industry. That's an industry which is working on that. It's really a diversity of viewpoint and perspective and experiences that does influence your business. And more diverse employee bases absolutely helps. Was there a time in your federal career, perhaps when you were at OMB, that you faced what you consider a real challenge? And how did you overcome it?
One moment that really stands out in particular was when I was serving as the Federal Chief Sustainability Officer during the Obama administration. We had set, like many administrations, had set some really ambitious goals, very, very, very ambitious goals around how do we think about making the federal government's operations much more sustainable. But the challenge wasn't so much about the scale or the technical capacity of the organization. A lot of it was really centered around the funding. We overcame this largely by being very strategic, helping out with blocking and tackling with the variety of legal issues or legal questions that might have come up, like how do we address this? Certainly in the federal government, you're more often leading through influence as opposed to pure form authority, and that you really need to listen deeply, communicate clearly with folks, building out those coalitions and engaging with your stakeholders. And I know many folks in government speak like that, but that is the truth.
As someone who's spent time in both the federal and the private sectors, what makes the relationship between the two sectors important?
Certainly, it's an absolutely essential partnership, and I would add on to that like nonprofits or philanthropic organizations. As I mentioned before, I'm Japanese American, and in Japan there's a symbol for thunder, which looks like 3 arrows pointing around each other in a circular pattern, kind of to represent the swirl, if you will, of clouds. And that's kind of how I view the relationship between the government, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector. The government frequently sets the vision, the policy, the direction, but of course it's the private sector that brings the capital, the innovation, the skill set, the capabilities, et cetera, to be able to execute. Partnering with that, of course, are the nonprofits who may be supporting the surrounding society. Public-private collaboration is not just about contracts or compliance, but it's also about figuring out what's your shared purpose. That's when real transformation can and does actually happen.
In life insurance, there's a concept, lifetime value, where bringing a new insured in costs a lot more money than the amount of premium. And so when you talk to commercial carriers, it's a similar kind of thing. You need to bring them into the concept that they're going to be with us 20 years, and after 5 years, you can ride through that. But it's a concept that isn't easy for commercial businesses to understand. That's a partnership too. Very, very similar. What advice would you give to somebody aspiring to become a leader in government?
There are 3 things, right? So firstly, around leadership in government, you want to make sure that you're leading with purpose. You want to stay grounded in your values, and don't underestimate the power of relationships. Remember why you entered public service in the first place, and that'll help carry you through some of the inevitable challenges that you're going to face. Making sure that you are also investing in relationships. In government, you rarely have full control, and I think this is, in my view, more important in government than perhaps in the private sector. You are frequently leading through influence. You are collaborating with very different parties who frequently have very different agendas than you do. And so building that trust, investing in building that trust and planting those seeds earlier and along the way in your career, I think is absolutely critical. And certainly last but not least, I would say, don't feel that you have to have it all figured out on day one. Absolutely stay open to the unexpected. Say yes to the opportunities that stretch you, and know that you can lead from wherever you are. It's not just about position or hierarchy. It's about the impact that you can have.
What wonderful advice, especially in today's world, which is a little topsy-turvy. Who is one person, someone you know personally, or perhaps someone well-known, that's impacted your leadership style?
The leaders that particularly stand out for me are Colin Powell, a woman named Carla Harris, who was a managing director in investment banking, and then last but not least would be my father. Starting with perhaps the more famous one, Colin Powell. I read his biography, loved his perspectives and the rules of leadership that have been particularly influential for me, right? So get mad, then get over it, share the credit, perpetual optimism, a force multiplier, things of that nature. And hearing his story was certainly very inspirational for me. And so I certainly very much look up to him as a role model. The second person that I mentioned is a woman named Carla Harris. She's an African-American woman, became a managing director at an investment bank in the 80s, at a time when there were not that many women of color in investment banking in New York. And so she's published a book called Her Pearls of Wisdom. It's one of her trademarks. She always wore a pearl necklace, and she has Pearls of Wisdom around how can you be authentic and build relationships to be successful in super challenging environments. And she had a lot of guidance on the importance of finding sponsors and mentors. And certainly last but not least, my father is really my why for I do a lot of the work that I do in the public sector. He started out life like many other, immigrant kids in poverty. He was a strawberry farm laborer. Japanese Americans at the time were not allowed to own the land, so we worked the land. He grew up in that kind of environment. And I just think it's absolutely neat that someone who came really he was dirt poor, to say it, and his daughter ended up working in the White House twice. It's quite the American dream, and I would very much like to have that opportunity available for other people as well.
Well, wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Christine, thank you very much for your time today and all of these learnings. It's really good, impactful. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
I'm Shane Canfield, CEO of WEPA. Until next time on Lessons in Leadership.
Find the full podcast and future episodes of Lessons in Leadership on the Federal News Network app and anywhere you enjoy your podcasts.